I'll invite, there it is. I'll invite all the folks from the project team here to maybe quickly introduce themselves, and then I'll pass it over to Iman and Megan to take it away for the first portion on the project update here. So Iman, do you want to kick us off with just a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is Iman Bukhari. Hi, everyone. I lead the Canadian Cultural Mosaic Foundation. And in terms of this project, I've been there since day one, and I'm just super excited to talk to you about all this.
And I'm Megan Eichhorn, a volunteer with the Canadian Cultural Mosaic Foundation. I've been a volunteer for the last few years, and currently I'm the main person doing the data collection.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Walker, and I have a background in environmental science, now working in data analytics. I've been volunteering with Data for Good for about 4 years now, and have been working on developing the dashboard and the initial data management for this project.
Hi everyone, my name is Jeremy, and like Jennifer and David from the Data for Good team, I've been involved in this project since basically its inception almost 2 years ago. And so my role in this project has largely been helping out with the dashboard, creating a script to scrape the articles to ensure data integrity, and helping out with the data management solutions.
Hello everyone, I'm Fikret, and I co-lead with David on the Data for Good Calgary chapter. And I wasn't as long as everyone else on this project, but I've joined recently on getting the data management solution up to speed, and happy to be part of this great group.
Awesome, thanks everyone. There was definitely other individuals as well who contributed to the team, but this is the main group presenting today. So with that, Iman and Megan, thanks again for joining us, and I'll get out of the way now and turn it over to you.
Thank you. We'll move to the next slide. So before we begin, I know everybody's in a virtual space and everybody's joining from different places, but I thought it'd be great to start with a land acknowledgement. And I know this is common practice these days, but I really love this quote where it just says, when we talk about the land is part of who we are. It's a mixture of our blood, our past, our current, and our futures. We carry our ancestors in us, and they're all around us, as you all do. And I think that really talks about the spirit of land acknowledgements in terms of acknowledging our blood, our past, current, and so forth. So with that, I'd like to honor and acknowledge all that reside on the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is where I'm currently at in Calgary, which includes the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations. We further acknowledge that we also are home to many Métis communities in Region 3 of the Métis Nation. And we conclude this with honoring the City of Calgary's Indigenous roots, traditionally known as Mohkinstsis. Next slide. So, quantifying racism in Canada through media reported incidents. 5-year trends from mainstream Canadian English language media reports from 2018 to 2022. That's really what our project is. It's been in the works for about 4 years now, a little bit over 4 years. And we really, really appreciate this partnership, because it would not have been where it is now without this partnership. Next slide, please. And just a little bit of introduction to Canadian Cultural Mosaic Foundation. We are a volunteer-led nonprofit working to improve race relations across Canada. So fairly similar to Data for Good in the sense that we are volunteer-led, and we do all kinds of projects. And our knowledge, instead of data, would be knowledge in race relations. And we have all types of volunteers. We have over 100 volunteers right now on our team working on 10 different projects currently. And volunteers come from all backgrounds as well. They could be lawyers, or myself, communicators. We have doctors on the team. We have people in business folks, tech folks, teachers, and so much more. In fact, 70% of our volunteers are actually teachers, because we worked on a really awesome project for Alberta teachers. So that's just a little bit more about us. Our website is canadiancmf.com if you want to find out more. Next slide. So essentially, this project came about a little bit more than 5 years ago when we were talking as a team that what does racism in Canada really look like? Is there a way to possibly quantify it? Probably not, and there's no simple answer to what does racism actually look like. But really what we wanted to do was actually challenge Canada's multicultural image. And we thought it'd be great to quantify some sort of statistics, some sort of data through this. We know Statistics Canada brings a lot of data in terms of hate crimes and other things, but in terms of actually looking at data of what does racism look like in Canada, there's very little out there. Recently, in the past 2 years, I will say there have been different organizations that have created websites of reporting data or looking at very specific areas through, police services or Statistics Canada and things like that. But there's no overarching Canada-wide type of look beyond Statistics Canada. And even what Statistics Canada has is quite limited, which we will talk in a bit. So yes, there is no simple answer, but we do know that data can help create systemic change, and that's what we try to do as an organization. So we really were wondering, how is it possible to do this? Next slide, please. And so I wanted to mention, while its visibility in mainstream racism in general has morphed and twisted over the year, racism has actually always existed in Canadian society. In fact, this nation is founded on racism, as I'm sure a lot of us know, but incidents of racism are actually vastly underreported, and still evidence shows that the frequency of such incidents is actually increasingly rapidly growing. Yet our governments continue to neglect the glaring need for actually national data, more than just prosecuted hate crimes, which is actually quite complicated. And that's what the next slide is about. Where, let's talk about hate crime and hate incidents. So I'm sure we've heard the term hate crime quite a bit, but what's a hate incident? So first, talking about crime, it's actually, actually classified under the Canadian Criminal Code as something that's defined as a crime motivated by hate. So it could be based on race, nationality or ethnic origin. It could be language, color of your skin, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability, sexual orientations, or other similar factors. But a hate incident is actually an action committed against a person or property, and the motive for which is based on the characteristics of the hate crime. But the incident isn't qualified as a hate crime by law because we're so restricted in terms of what a hate incident is. And really, for non-criminal hate incidents, police are limited to their ability of what they can actually do. And what this really comes down to is actually motivation. So how can we decipher that something is a hate incident when it's all based on motivation? How can you know somebody else's motivation? Which is why we don't have any sort of way to track how many hate incidents are really happening in this world, because so many things do happen and we know that they're underreported. Folks might not want to report, but how is it possible to gather this data when we don't have any system in place to actually, gather it and make something of it? Next slide, please. Which is where it comes down to, well, why are racist incidents underreported? Well, there's often a fear of retaliation or repercussions, like, hey, if I report this incident, something terrible might happen to me. If somebody has done harm to me, I'm scared they might come after me or may make things worse for me or the people that I love. There's a distrust in the system. Even if I do report something, what's going to happen? They're possibly going to waste my time or not believe me, make me feel even worse, possibly. There's also a lack of awareness. A lot of folks don't even know that you can actually report incidents or crimes. And then the normalization of racism. I think this is number one, and we get this quite a bit because we continuously get emails all the time from people across the country, in fact, talking about, hey, this incident happened, what should I do? What are some next steps? And we are connected to a lot of police services and other organizations where we, give them the information that they need, but just the normalization, hey, this happened, hey, here are all the resources that we provide them. And then they're just like, oh, this happens all the time. I don't have time for this. I was, upset in the moment, but this happens all the time. So it's all good. And then that stat from Statistics Canada that Canadians actually self-reported 223,000 hate-motivated incidents in just 2019, but police investigated fewer than 1% of them. of the hate crimes, and that's investigation, you know, so just because it got investigated doesn't mean it actually became a hate crime. So there are definitely a lot of hurdles when it comes to getting this data. The only data that we have are really hate crimes that have been investigated and have become hate crimes. So we can definitely see, you know, the lack of data that we have, but at the end of the day, we need this data in order to actually do something about it, actually make our governments do something about it. And so the next slide, which is my last slide, where I just wanted to show, you know, this is based off of Statistics Canada's information from 2018, just talking about hate crimes with the motivation of hate, so with race, sorry. And these are crimes again, because that's really the only data we have. And we're seeing in this graph which communities are most affected, not specified because they might not be comfortable. Indigenous being, you know, essentially the lowest out of all these communities. And that's, and you know, when you look at our data, it actually goes against this data that Statistics Canada had, where we show that in fact Indigenous and Black communities are actually the ones that are most targeted, whether it's crimes or incidents. But again, I listed the reason why crimes, or sorry, incidents go underreported. So this is already showing, you know, the data is not realistic, and we need to do something about it. And that's really what we're hoping to get out of this project, is to try and get data that can be a little bit more realistic. Obviously, it's very small. We're looking, and we're going to talk about this in the next slide, so we can move over, and I believe Megan will be presenting that one, but we're really looking at a very small portion of data here, but still we're hoping to find trends, and we are finding trends that aren't available through Statistics Canada or any place else. And Megan, I'll let you go over this.
Thank you. So our goal for this project is to track and collect data on incidents, whether they're criminal or not, incidents of racism that are reported in mainstream Canadian English language media over a 5-year period. So this is creating a unique data set that begins to paint a fuller picture of the different types of racism that exist in Canada. The research illustrates trends such as frequency and locations of reported incidents, ethnicities that were targeted, different intersectionalities, and more. And the intention is to use the research to lobby for change. While the initial concept for this project may have been developed by CCMF, it really evolved into a true partnership with Data for Good. A critical component of the success of this project is matching the data expertise with the knowledge of anti-racist language and concepts. This project absolutely could not have happened without Data for Good. We are super grateful for the opportunity to work together. This partnership has ensured that the data is nuanced and that it's useful for the researchers and journalists while staying true to the overall goals of the project. Next slide, please. So we do have some limitations. We are an entirely volunteer-run organization, so we are limited in terms of time, funding, and other resources. We also relied on Google Alerts to provide the list of news articles, and so there are some limitations with that as well. Sorry. So prior to our partnership with Data for Good, the project had a few different volunteers working on it, which led to inconsistent data collection. And Data for Good really helped us out with that to fix the old data. And now we have this standardized process that minimizes the opportunities for human error, which is greatly enhancing the quality of the data and making it more useful. Previously, like we'd just been typing the data into a spreadsheet. So there's tons of errors. A lot of them were mine. Data for Good created a form and a database that really increased the efficiency, saved me a lot of time, and it enabled us to enter the data much faster with a lot less errors. So we used 19 keywords with the Google Alerts, which included a bunch of different variations of the word racism, as well as more specific terms like white supremacy, Islamophobia, xenophobia, etc. So unfortunately, even with our pretty comprehensive list of keywords, Google Alerts does miss a number of reports. And so I was able to catch some, but not all of these. And so that is one of the limitations of the project. We're also limited by the capabilities of the media. So in the digital age, there are fewer journalists overall, and the ones that are still around have pretty intense workloads. So I would say and statistically, the majority of mainstream media journalists are white and presumably don't have anti-racism training. So we can't always rely on the media to correctly identify incidents as racial incidents when they should be. Next slide, please.
Okay, I will switch over to share my screen here. You just give me a moment. Okay, so now we'll take a quick glimpse of what the data looks like. So this is the data after it has undergone that cleaning process that Megan mentioned, where we took the initial data and we went through it to standardize it and make it consistent. And we now have it in a spreadsheet here. And so you can see the different types of variables that we are tracking here. So there's some qualitative data like the incident description. We have details on when and where the incident occurred, whether it was reported to police or not, the gender of the victim, the type of incident, what sort of setting or context it occurred in, any identity-based intersectionalities, other trends such as a white supremacy or a potential hate crime, as well as information, of course, about the ethnicity that was targeted in the incident. So to back up and tell you how we got to this point with the data. So as Megan mentioned, there was the initial data collection where they were typing the data manually into a spreadsheet, and they were using various tags to capture the themes that they were interested in. And so when we got their initial data from them, one of the first steps was to look at all these different tags that they'd been typing in and try to figure out what were the overarching themes, try to consolidate them, standardize the spelling and capitalization and consolidate. And the objective of this process was to figure out what were the different categorical dimensions in the data. So that would be these things like the type of incident, the ethnicities, the context. We wanted to kind of parse out these different dimensions in the data because those would then correspond to the charts that we will be showing in the dashboard. So with that initial process, and I'll show you here a little bit an idea of what that looked like. So we have on the left, there were some initial tags. These are just a few examples of the ones that were in that, that first spreadsheet that we worked with. And these tags now map to different dimensions and different categories in what we call the taxonomy, which defines what are the different themes that we're interested in and the relationships between them. So one of the things that we discovered was in some cases when an incident was reported, the information about the ethnicity of the victim in some cases was very broad. You might just know they were Black or they were Asian, Middle Eastern. And then in other cases, you might have a more detailed or a more granular information where you actually know not just East Asian, but also China or Japan. And so we split this into these into a hierarchy, depending on how much information you had available in the article. And then, for example, things like anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, we consolidate that into one category, and it goes into this intersectionalities, where we're looking at various other intersections with the racism. Things like political campaign, those turned into one category called politics in the context, or vandalism. Well, that's telling us what type of incident, what happened. So you can see we took basically these initial tags and we developed this taxonomy with the different dimensions and a set of categories for each of those dimensions. So this process was very much a collaborative process. So we took the data and tried to identify the themes and then worked with CCMF because of course they have the expertise on the, the race relations side of it. And so we wanted to consult with them to develop that taxonomy and that set of categories and hone in on the things that they are interested in tracking. Also to clarify the types of incidents to be included. So we, as Megan had mentioned, with different people entering data over the years, sometimes different types of incidents would be included. For example, maybe an anti-racism rally, or it could be something like an opinion piece. And so we wanted to narrow it down to we found that the scope of what we wanted to look at was really just an incident, a racist incident that occurred and was reported in the media. So we don't want so that way we can count them and categorize them. So we clarified the scope, and all of this, the idea behind it was to be using anti-racist language and concepts underpinning this process. So then with the data cleaning, once we had identified our taxonomy, we refined the scope. We went through and removed any incidents that didn't fit that inclusion criteria. We went and standardized the geographic locations so we could put them on a map, assign categories from the taxonomy, and then compiled the clean data into a Google Sheet. So now I will switch to show you what the dashboard looks like. So we have on the CCMF website, they've set up a project page here, which gives you some information about the project. And then if you click on the view dashboard link here, it takes you to the dashboard. So this is where we can now visualize all of this data. So at the top here, we have some different options you can select. So you can, for example, focus in on a specific year or a specific province. If you're interested in one specific and a more if you want to hone in on a subset of the data. Otherwise, you can and it will affect all of the charts that you see on this dashboard. Otherwise, you can view all of it. So we'll just see what it looks like when you view all the data. So the time period here goes from 2018 to present, and you get the number of incidents. We can see the monthly totals over time. We can also, hover over any of these points here to see the exact number. You can also switch to a yearly view here. So this tells you how the number of incidents is changing over time. Bearing in mind, of course, all of this is with the limitations of this is just what is actually reported in the media, and as well with the Google alerts and whatnot. So in some cases, the number of incidents are changing over time. It also could be that the media might be paying more or less attention as well. So there are different factors that are affecting these numbers. We can see the totals compiled geographically. So you can see the totals by province here. And you can also see them for specific cities and towns. And you can do things like zoom in here, for example, see Calgary, and so on. All of the charts here as well are available in table format too. So in case anyone really wants to dig into the numbers, they can take a look at the tables. And so now we have the trends about the victims of the racist incidents. So we have the ethnic communities here, and these are those broad communities that I mentioned. And then you can also, in some cases, we might have a drill down into specific, more detailed categories here. So you can use the this drill down feature here and see the breakdown when it's available. We also have the gender of the victims when it's reported. And we have these identity-based intersectionalities. The tooltips here also in some cases give you some additional information like definitions. You can drill down here, see different types of religious discrimination. We have now the trends about the racist incidents. So what happened, and the criminal justice processing, this is telling us of the incidents that were reported in the media, what fraction of them were actually reported to the police as a potential crime, and that's less than a third. And then of those, how many had criminal charges laid? It's a much smaller fraction still, with the caveat again that this is just what's available in the article. Often there may not be follow-up information. You might only know about the initial report to police, so we don't always know the final outcome. The type of incident, so this is telling us what happened. We have things like different types of hate speech or harassment, things like racial profiling or carding, assault, and so on. And then this chart here tells us the different settings in which these racist incidents occurred. Things like public spaces, protective services like police, workplace, politics, online, educational institute. And we can also see breakdown here as well. So educational institute into K through 12 or post-secondary. So when we have those more detailed categories, you can see the breakdown there. And then finally, we have the Data Explorer table, which shows you basically all of the raw data. So you can search through it. You can download it yourself if you want. You can search for, say you're interested in learning about seeing incidents with white supremacy. So you can search that and it'll search any of these columns here in the table and it'll show you the different results. And you can click on the links, the URLs here to see the actual article for each of those incidents. And then the one last thing I'll say about the dashboard. So we do have these different settings here at the top. If I want to, let's say, select a province, it'll now say I'm viewing the data for this province, and all of these charts and the numbers and everything are all now filtered to that specific province or year. If I selected a year, there's also various other options you can select as well if you really want to dig in and focus in on, for example, maybe you want to see all incidents that are targeting East Asian communities or a specific city or town or various intersectionalities. So that is the demo. And then this is my last slide here before I pass it over. So the design criteria for this dashboard, the target audience, there's various people who we want this dashboard to be useful for. So there's the general public, also researchers who might be interested in the data, other nonprofit organizations. And then one of the really most important criteria from CCMF for the design was the user experience. They wanted to make sure it was really simple and easy to use, easy to comprehend. So you don't need to have a high level of technical literacy to understand it and gain insights from it. They wanted it to be accessible. So for example, using colors and fonts that are that will be easy to read, for if anyone is colorblind or they have visual impairments. And then also that it should be mobile friendly because the large majority of visitors to the CCMF website are viewing it on their phone. So we wanted to make sure that the dashboard would, sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit today. We wanted to make sure that the dashboard would render really nicely and would be you could use it and all the functionality even if you're viewing it on your phone. with that, I will stop sharing my screen, I think. Yeah, and I will pass it over to Jeremy.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Let me just get my screen sharing up. Perfect. Awesome. So that whole process took us only 2 days, right? It was just like a hackathon sort of thing, and then we just spent 24 hours together and just coded all of that away. Yeah, I wish that was the case. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it took us a very long process, and we had to make a lot of decisions throughout that process. So I'm just going to go talk about the history, some of the history of the project, and why we made some decisions the way we did. The initial considerations we have was between choosing what platform to build our dashboard in. The two options that we had based on the skill sets of our volunteers were Power BI and Shiny. And so let's take a look at actually what the first iteration of both these platforms look like. So with the Power BI platform, this was coded by one of our volunteers named Melissa. Basically, the only way we could realistically present like a mobile view was to actually just have it as like a screen option when we select the start. But since I'm on a desktop, let's go to the landscape view. And so with the landscape view, we see that we are able to generate these nice looking graphics, but the sort of the downside is that it's sort of like it feels more like a slideshow, more or less. We had to go scroll through these pages by, clicking arrows, and this is like realistically the only way we could actually look at these graphics. For our first iteration of the R Shiny app, let me just reload. We could have it look really nice in like a minimalistic manner. And so basically we have all of our data points centered around different cities, as just using the map as an example. And when we, for example, go in on a city, we can always zoom in more. Eventually, these will be basically our points of where the incidents took place in. And then the visualization, which is I think currently not working now because we changed the location of the data sets, offered us some simple graphs as well. And so we ended up going with the R Shiny option because it was more diverse. It was more customizable, and it was, I guess, cleaner looking, and it had good mobile support. So in terms of the dashboard implementation itself, the advantage were, as I mentioned, it was mobile friendly and we could fully customize the style and functionality. One library that we did use was called Eichhorn, and we used this for the plots to make really nice styled plots. And so Eichhorn is JavaScript based. It has really clean default looking styling. The tooltips were easy to add and customize. And finally, it offered options for drill downs for hierarchical data. During this process, we also consulted a senior user experience architect. His name is Peter Ma. So we brought him in from the outside to basically give us feedback on what he thought was working and what he thought wasn't working. So he gave us a couple points of feedback. First, he guided us on a little bit on language use and recommend for us to stick with, of course, lay terms that the audience could generally understand, but also knowing that we did want to balance it out with terms that were more descriptive and correct. He also advised us to keep our points short. You might have seen at the end of Jennifer's demo, we had like an option near the bottom of our dashboard to hide some information away. We didn't want to have huge blocks of text that would clutter the dashboard. Peter also gave us some design feedbacks as well. The first is to have to actually consider the audience computer literacy. So this is like, if you looked back at my the first iteration I made, sometimes for a lot of the audience, we overestimate like how good they are with computers. And so he sent us a really nice graphic on the right where basically looking at the how people rate themselves and their computer literacy skills, he found out like the vast majority of Canadians wouldn't rate themselves as strong of having computer skills. So we had to keep that in mind as well when we were designing this this dashboard. And finally, to also make colors accessible and appropriate. So you might have noticed with the demo that Jennifer showed, we didn't go crazy with the colors. We didn't have a whole bunch of red, white, blue. We weren't jumping on with the colors. We stuck to a very defined palette. And then, of course, he gave us advice on to eliminate redundant wording. And finally, he did tell us to an interesting point to actually make the images appropriate to stories. So this was in the context of us discussing how we could display data in like a pyramid shape. And so on the left figure, I've shown basically depending on how you structure the pyramid, whether you have it upside down or you have it facing up, this could lead to different messages being conveyed. And so finally, we also performed user testing as well, usability testing, which is just generally a method of testing the functionality of the dashboard by observing how real users would interact with it. And so the goal of this was basically to see where the dashboard wasn't working, uncover these areas where they might be causing confusion and improving them. So we designed a series of tasks, a questionnaire for the users to fill, and we saw with the overall aim to see if they could accomplish what they had in mind. Now we are running a little bit low on time, so I'm not going to ask everybody to actually find how many incidents occurred in British Columbia in the year 2020, but I encourage everyone to do this maybe as an exercise if you ever want to play around with the dashboard. And now I will hand it over to Fikret. Or sorry, Jennifer.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's part of
Yeah.
me. Okay, here, let me share my screen. There you go. And why do I always forget it? Okay, here's slideshow. Okay, yes, I just have a couple quick slides here and talking about the initial data management solution. So this is what we're using right now. We had the data cleaning process where we set up the spreadsheet, but then we needed something in order to so that CCMF could continue adding new data as they continue tracking the media reports over time. So the goal was to, rather than typing things into a spreadsheet manually, to have a form that has predefined categories for consistent data entry. So we set this up as a Google form, but then we quickly kind of started encountering some of the limitations of it. And so what we ended up doing was developing a script with Google Apps script as a workaround to some of the limitations. So for example, in Google Form, we had to split some of the questions up into different questions. So if you have the cities for the different provinces, we now have the city is split into multiple different columns in the form response. Instead, we just want the city in one column. So we needed to set up this script in order to consolidate the columns, do some additional data validation that's not available in the form. And so then we take this process data from the script, and that populates the incidents data in the Google Sheet. And then we have another tab in the sheet, which is for the categories. And so we list all our categories there, and along with things like the definitions that show up in the tooltips. This has been working reasonably well, but it's a bit fragile. There's some bugs with the Google script trigger that causes duplicates sometimes. And we also just found it was quite difficult when we want to add new categories, or especially even worse if we want to change one of the previously entered categories, because all of these different components are all disconnected. The categories here and the definitions, we enter them manually, and then we have to enter them manually in the Google form if we want to change them there. If we need to revise any old previously entered data, we have to do that manually as well, because we can't use the form to pull it up and edit it. So we just, as we started using the system more and more, we found ourselves really bumping into the limitations of the Google form. And so that's when we realized that what we really need is a relational database to link all of these different parts together, so that the categories in the form, and then the categories in the incidence data, and then the tooltips, and all of those, they are all related. And we needed a system that's going to be able to capture those relationships, so we don't have to change something in 3 different places every time you want to make a change. So now I will hand it over to Fekrat to talk about the next steps for developing a new and improved data management solution.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let me share my screen. Okay. So as Jennifer has mentioned, okay, let me start first. Can you see my screen? Is it visible? Perfect. Okay. As Jennifer has mentioned, we have noticed the inconsistencies and such, and we want this project to move on and grow, actually, not only just in many data projects, we always notice the trend of we analyzing the data and we complete the graphs, but we don't take the next step of building it in a systematic manner to ensure it lives on and actually allow people to collaborate more and more on in an easy way that will allow them to share the data cleanly, consistently, and accurately, ensuring that the dashboards are always presenting the latest and greatest of results to the users, whether they were the general public, whether it is other nonprofits or any other users of those shiny our dashboards. And this is when we came into our next goal of this project of let's see what can we do about those limitations of Google Forms. And of course, the solution simply was we need to look at finding a solution where we can streamline data entry, making sure that the CCMF, let's call them business rules, are respected, especially when it comes to data consistency, whether like you cannot just, you need to make sure that when you build a system that when they say context, it actually relates to actual context that has already been approved and defined by the system managers, let's call them that way. So we need a system that makes all of that a realization, while at the same time, as you know, when you go to a relational database, you still want the data in a format that the dashboards can easily pick up and actually read and display and for the general public without, of course, burdening the public of having to go through dumps and dumps of Excel sheets, let's say, let's call them that way, Excel sheets of data that to the public, they don't really care. They care more about the denormalized format of the end result that is easier for them to see, read, and process on their day-to-day consuming of the dashboard or the data itself. Let me see. And of course, our design methodology, after much debates and talks and based on our technical expertise in the Data for Good team, we have decided to leverage a relational database, which is the Oracle database. We were made aware of the availability to everyone, actually, not only a specific nonprofit, but everyone has the capability to build their own database in the cloud for free for over 20 gigs of data, which is more than any data set at this point in time would require, while also leveraging what we call as a low-code building software solutions or data-centric building of data-centric applications using an Oracle technology called Oracle Apex. And I've kept this in the slides. We will not be delving into the demo today because we're still in the building stage, but I did keep some useful links for anyone who's interested to read more about how can they get their own database actually, and maybe even build their own data-centric application that is public, that is available to the web. So we have kept those 2 useful links for you for the future. In addition to that, we have also worked on ensuring a more technically adapt dashboard deployment, where we have made sure that as David has mentioned, this collaboration not only is benefiting CCMF, but us as Data for Good, we're learning how to make sure we have a document, a process that we can use not only for this project, but also for the future projects and future volunteer involvement to teach our volunteers and ourselves how we can professionally publicize those dashboards securely, safely. As you all know, nowadays, security and safety is of the top priority of anyone that builds a solution. And of course, we have highlighted some of the steps, some of the design steps that we believe are important whenever you want to start a project similar to ours, where it involves a dashboard, while at the same time you want to expand on the dashboard and ensure a consistent flow of data into the dashboard. And those steps have been highlighted in, this is the first slide of many steps. One of those will show you the steps that we took to ensure a secure dashboard deployment with a proper domain and a proper hosting that is available to anyone, actually, securely. And of course, as you all know, with an SSL certificate, as we all know that whenever you publicize anything to the web, you need to take ownership of that website and to make sure that you prevent attackers from creating a fake version to of your website, so that you can convey a sense of trust between you and the general public. And those are the steps we took, and we hope that this will help other volunteers to take such steps to ensure that when they assist other nonprofits or themselves, they take into considerations those important steps. And we have highlighted our current architecture of how we are currently building this solution, how our Shiny dashboard is currently being fed through the data files and being secured by the SSL certificate on our Nginx frontend, and how the Oracle data management solution currently is feeding the data into the Oracle site. But the future architecture is to keep everything in one place, consistent. And as we mentioned before, we are not only looking for a data management solution to write the data, but also to make sure that data is securely available to our Shiny dashboard. So the dashboard always shows the latest and greatest to the users of this system. And in addition to those, as I mentioned earlier, we put the steps for how to deploy your proper Shiny server, but also the steps that we are undertaking in our project to build the data management solution, whether it is from reviewing the data sets, creating the tables, creating the entity relationship diagrams, making sure that all the team members have access to this new database. And some more steps, I think starting from step 5, we start talking about steps that are more related to building the web application of having an authentication and authorization system in place, and creating your lookup pages, your documenting your business rules to ensure a consistent and accurate set of data, so that anyone who is entering the data don't have to worry about the validity of what they're entering. The system will help them to the best of its ability as we implement. And in addition, of course, to that, we are trying, of course, to have a training manual for the system and mimicking the denormalized access to the data. And this is simply saying that we need to present the data in a way that our Shiny dashboard expects to read it today. And of course, some more cleanup to the data that we believe, especially when it comes to location data, I believe, and scrapping of article text. We are still working on those. And the last but not least is, once all of this is ready and is in place, we will start bulk loading those Excel sheets and testing the system for future data entry. And before I push to the next presenter, I think it's Megan, I'll just say that our Data for Good data operations team is always on the lookout for volunteers. And if you are interested in learning how to use an Oracle Apex, which is a low-code technology, which doesn't require you much knowledge of a technical basis, but it will really push you to present, to work on real life projects also through us as Data for Good, but also will give you the skill sets and tools to be able to build the data management solution in your future endeavors. So please reach out to us if you're interested. We are always on the lookout for that. I believe, Megan, you're next. I will give you the slide share.
Megan,
thank you,
I can start sharing my screen again here. Just give me 1 second. But you can start talking if you like, and I'll catch up with you.
Sure thing. So while we have active promotion of this project is planned for early 2023, but there are several groups who have already expressed interest in the data, including various university professors working on race relations and anti-racism projects, journalists, government bodies, police services, researchers, and diversity, equity, and inclusion specialists, and also general community members. There have been a lot of really interesting trends, like shifts in media attention following major national or worldwide events. So for example, like the death of George Floyd in 2020 and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter protests, that changed you might remember seeing that there was quite a big increase in reported incidents in 2020. That is because of the increased media attention. Also with the COVID-19 pandemic, that definitely put a spotlight on anti-Asian racism. And there was a lot of really interesting things that came out of that. Like also there all of a sudden was all these Zoom bombings happening. So there was different anti-racism groups that were getting hackers coming into their Zooms and, you know, putting in all these images and words and stuff like that. So when we begin active promotion of the project, we plan to release a full research study as well as advertising the project online and through our other connections. Following that, we plan on connecting with those who've expressed interest in the project to see what its future can be beyond the 5-year study. And we are also open to ideas for other potential future plans. So yeah, thank you so much. And again, I just want to reiterate how amazing this partnership has been. We literally could not have done it without Data for Good. It has been such a benefit to us as an organization to have that partnership. So thanks to all of you who have helped us throughout the last couple years. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Megan. I'm just gonna just go to the next slide, the last slide here. We wanted to just give a few shout outs as well. Of course, the Data for Good volunteer team, so Jennifer, who presented, and Jeremy as well. Fekrat and Melissa, we I believe mentioned too, as well as a number of others who were involved in the early goings of the project. And then, of course, I just want to say thanks as well to the CCMF team, Iman, Megan, who presented, and then Peter, who also for the usability testing there. Fraser, I see you have a question, but we do have one more segment, and I want to pass it over to one of my Data for Good colleagues to just give a quick update on the micro projects. And then at the end of that, Fraser, if we can take a few minutes then for questions, we'd love to take your question at that point. So Corinne and Tony, I was going to hand it over to you. Actually, so you might not be co-hosts. So Oscar, can you just make sure that Corinne and Tony are enabled to present?
Yeah, just 1 sec. Okay, should be good to go.
Tony, are you here tonight? If not, I can tell you a bit about You guys can hear me, right?
Yes,
We can.
Cool. I have no slides for this portion, but we want to tell you about a new initiative that we have, which is called micro projects. And what we want to do is give people opportunities to work together and learn skills, develop understandings about data management, get to network between all these big events we have. We have the datathons, we have these really good partnership projects, but they can take a year or several years. So they're bigger initiatives. But what we want to do is make smaller initiatives that are run by the members, and they're a small time frame. They're going to be for social benefit or public good, and they're going to be brief. So each one is only 1 to 4 weeks, so they never get overwhelming or drag on too long. If it's interesting, you can always link one mini project, micro project, to another and another to accomplish a bigger goal. They wanted every piece to be small and to have some tangible outcome, whether it's even just identifying a data set, identifying questions of interest, or creating a dashboard, or cleaning a data set. It's up to you guys to decide what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then share it with all our members. So we really encourage that you use open data sets, because then you can share the data you're using and you can share the results. The biggest benefit is that you start to build tools, you start to build connections. So when we do a project like we did with CCMF, or we do a datathon, you have more talent and you've already developed skills that you can use in your daily life or as a hobby, depending on where data fits in your life. So we pitched this idea. Sorry, David.
Karina, I was just going to say, I did put up the slides that Tony had shared with us. Are you
Yeah.
able to talk about the 3 projects? I can definitely advance to those slides if you are.
Yeah. I was just going to mention that we pitched this last month and had a networking session at the end. We had 6 good ideas come up, and we're only starting with 3 because we're piloting this. We're building experience on how to do this. But of those 3 that we have started, we'd like to describe what they are to get your ideas, get you to start thinking and think about what you'd like to maybe suggest as we build this and we're able to take on more micro projects. So the first one is to raise awareness on Calgary's climate. So this is a bigger, they're not going to finish this in 4 weeks, but they would like to create a catalog of the climate related data sets in Calgary so that other people can find them quickly and use them. And I love this, is that they're looking at where these data sets could intersect and make these intersections known and create maps or other visualizations that you can see how these data sets link, because a lot of power in data is being able to put things together, but it's not always obvious how things can be matched. So the benefit is to raise awareness on what could impact climate change in Calgary, which of course is definitely something that would be for the good of Calgarians. Next project. Next one is on Calgary Public Transit. And they want to look at what's going on with transit in Calgary with statistical and spatial analysis, and possibly even make recommendations for where transit could be modified to make it more effective. So the benefit, of course, is to improve public transportation, and that's great for social benefits as well as economic and environmental sustainability, giving people options where they don't need to use a car and still can get around. So we think this is going to be pretty exciting. And the third is interesting because it's quite different from anything we've seen before, and it's about pet adoption. And they want to look into, like, dig into information about pets in shelters and look at how they can improve the success of adoptions. and create visualizations about this. And I think it was partly inspired by the whole COVID situation where people adopted pets and now suddenly they might be returning them because their lifestyle has changed, and that made them wonder, what can we do to show, like, get people more aware of the whole adoption opportunities and issues. So with the goal of reducing the time pets spend in shelters, more happy endings. So that's a nice different take on a social benefit. These are our first 3 pilots, and because they're pilots, they may take a bit longer than the 4 weeks because we're all figuring out how to set this in place and do the whole process, but we're looking forward to reporting out on this. I imagine, if not this upcoming month, but the month after, somewhere in that time frame. Now, notice the micro projects have requested some assistance, and here are the different needs. Now, this isn't broken down by project, but elsewhere we would be able to say, if you're interested in a specific project, you could pick that. And if you have a talent, you can see here that the projects they will have 1 to 5 volunteers. And if they don't already have the volunteers they need, we help them advertise for what skill set they're looking for, whether it's a hard skill or a soft skill or a subject matter expert. So keep an eye on our Slack channel and our Twitter, see what kind of skills we're looking for, and see if you would like to volunteer for this micro project of 1 to 4 weeks. Gives you a chance to learn other people in our community and learn other skills.
Awesome. Thank you, Corinne, for jumping in there and providing that update on the micro projects. So it's pretty exciting, actually. We're piloting this. As you can see, we had a number of good ideas for micro projects to move forward. We selected 3 of them to pilot with to see how this goes. And there's actually a number of opportunities to get involved, as Corinne just pointed out. So if it's one of the micro projects, if you're not sure how much time you can commit and you might just want to commit for 1 to 4 weeks here, that's a great opportunity to jump in and get involved. If you are interested more longer term, feel free to reach out to me directly as well. And we can talk about the core team opportunities, both for not-for-profit engagement and the data ops side of things there. So we do have a few minutes left at the end of our meetup here. So if there are any questions, I think we can take a few questions. So Fraser, if you do want to ask a question, go for it. I'm not sure, Oscar, can everybody unmute at this point, or is that still restricted?
Yep, everyone can turn on their video, unmute. So to keep a process going, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and then we'll call on you to ask questions, and then the CCMF team can answer them. So Fraser, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, sure. I really appreciated tonight's presentation. I think it's an excellent example of where kind of a longer term partnership with an organization makes sense. I mean, what you guys tackled today is not something that could be solved in a week. And I really started to appreciate how much effort was invested by everybody to get this done. One of the things that kind of stuck out for me was, the slide that you kind of shared that I guess kind of spoke to computer literacy of Canadians there in terms of their ability to use computers. I was almost wondering, you have the dashboard that people who are fairly computer literate could use, but I'm wondering about using the information and the insights that you spoke about, basically using that to tell a story on your website. So the trends that you saw, does that show up somewhere on your website to maybe those people that aren't ready to interact with the dashboard?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something that will come out with our research study, all of those trends that we noticed throughout the project. It will, but yeah, that's a really good point. It's a good place to have to house those trends somewhere on the website for sure.
Yeah, I think for now we wanted to make it accessible so that everybody can explore and play with the dashboard, and make the dashboard as simple as possible so that people can navigate it on their own. But we didn't want to try to, I think, provide that narrative or that analysis just yet. As Megan mentioned, I think that's one of the future steps in analysis to still come.
I'll just add, like, because we're not actively promoting the project just yet, once we get to that point in early 2023, then we'll start publishing the trends and the research study and whatnot.
Are there any other questions on either on the CCMF project or on the sort of micro projects and volunteer opportunities we mentioned? I do see one question in the chat, but if there's any other ones, feel free to chime in as well. So how are learners can get involved in some of the volunteer opportunities? Corinne, maybe I'll bring you back for this one. Is this an opportunity, in your opinion, as well, where sort of people who are just looking to learn a bit can get involved as well?
I think that's one of the things we'd really like to see. I'm not sure if we'll do that for the pilot, but one of the things I've found at Datathons and other opportunities is shadowing. So you're working at a table and you're seeing somebody else using R or somebody else doing a data diagram. And you can ask questions and you can learn from what they're doing by looking over their shoulder. And I think these micro projects would have an opportunity for that, and maybe even be able to offer that, you know, they're planning on having these skills and they will welcome one or two people to look over somebody's shoulder and then maybe do some additional work or contribute ideas or contribute to the project while they can look over somebody's shoulder. So we have not built that in yet because we want to build this one step at a time. But what we are really looking for these micro projects to be is a way to engage in small increments. So you're not obligated. If you do one micro project, you don't have to sign up for the next one. You look at the skills, you look at the time you're available, and you decide when it works for you. But at least when it works for you, you get a chance to work with other people in our community. And I've met some really neat people in our community by working shoulder to shoulder. Even if it's virtually, still, sometimes it's even easier because you share screens and you see how somebody does something in Power BI or in R, and you say, oh, that's amazing. And you take that and you can apply it at the next project you work on. So I'd say for the next month or two, Innocent, I don't think necessarily, but it is something we have in mind, is also a way that by shadowing, you can see how people do things. And we are also working on other things like a list of resources that we'd started in our group, and we're going to share with the YYC data community, I believe. But ideas of how you can like start to learn R or start to learn Python, because there's so many free online tools now where you can get started. So you at least know the basics. Like if you're learning piano, you want to be able to learn a couple of chords before you join a trio and start jiving with music. Same with this, you might want to do a couple of online lessons with Python, or R, and then start job shadowing, and then start joining projects like this so you have a practical reason to use the things you are learning. So we will also be working on providing ideas of how you can get a simple start and then jump onto projects and then enhance your skills while you work on projects.
I have also, while you were saying that, Corinne, I have shared our Data for Good resources site so that whoever is interested to build their skill sets, we definitely do advise you to go there and look at the various things to learn. And but if you are already learning something, definitely you can jump to our Slack channel and ask other volunteers. If you engage with the community, you could maybe either work together or even hear of new data operation projects that we have similar to CCMF and others that might be coming up.
Yeah, and that's great that you're learning R already, Innocent. I think that whenever we do onboard learners, we definitely want to make sure that it's a combination of experience levels that are on the team, and we just haven't built anything like that into the micro projects yet. But like Corinne said, in future iterations, definitely we want to give opportunities for people up and down the spectrum of experience levels. All right, if there's no other last minute questions here, then I think we're good to wrap things up here with 5 minutes to go. So thank you, Megan, very much for coming in and presenting. Thank you to Jeremy and Jennifer and Fekrat as well. Iman had to leave a little bit early, so thank you to her as well. And thank you for everyone for coming out. We look forward to seeing you next month again at our next meetup. So
thank you. Thank you, Ross,
everyone.
Thank you, Ross, for providing us access to your Zoom account. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks all for attending. It was a really interesting session.
Yep. The recording will be up probably by tomorrow, so we'll share that out, and we can send it to you as well, Megan, so you can have a copy of that.
That'd be awesome. Thanks. And thank you everyone again. Thanks for everyone's time and the support throughout this whole project.
Looking forward to doing that exercise on BC now.
Yeah, we should have at least provided the answer to see if anyone or see if anyone would come up with the answer, even though we didn't officially make an assign.
Post it on the meetup tomorrow.
Exactly.
Okay. Good night, everyone. Bye.
See you, Oscar.
See you, Oscar.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you guys for running it. That was a good session. I really, really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Corinne.
Thanks, Corinne. Jennifer, if you're still here, your demo reminded me sort of how, the work that we did put into it in terms of the usability.